So before we dive into looking at the different features, I want to define the term that I'll be using throughout, and that is built-in accessibility features. So what I mean by this is assistive features that are on mainstream devices like computers, tablets, and smartphones. They come on the device right out of the box, so you don't need to purchase additional apps or software or hardware in order to use these features. So examples of built-in features that have been around with iOS for a long time include Zoom, VoiceOver, voice control, assistive touch. There are many. Typically, these are found in your device's settings menu in an accessibility submenu. We're going to focus today on the iPad, but many of these features are available on other kinds of tablets, computers, and smartphones. Or if they're not available on other devices right now, it's possible that they may be very soon. If you've never been into your own device's accessibility menu, I would highly encourage you to go in there, explore that menu on your own phone and computer and tablet or any other devices that you might have. That's a great place to start learning about these different features. As a disclaimer, this webinar is not an endorsement of any kind. I am not trying to sell you an iPad by telling you how great their features are or claiming that iPad has better accessibility features than Android does or anything like that. This was a requested topic. We are always happy to field your requests for webinar and training topics, so send those our way. But you might notice throughout this presentation that I get pretty excited about accessibility. I just think it is very exciting that we are at this point in time where the biggest technology companies like Apple and Google and Microsoft are competing against each other to come out with built-in accessibility features and to create devices that are more inclusive and more usable by people with disabilities. It feels like we're at a very pivotal time with regards to assistive technology being included more and more on mainstream devices versus being a separate and costly thing. And so I think it's going to continue to be an interesting thing to watch develop. And to just see more and more assistive features be introduced as built-ins on our devices. So it's something that I get excited about. It's something that I'm following very closely. But with that being said, accessibility features or the built-in accessibility features on our devices are not going to be the right solution for every person. So if you're going to try any of these features with your students or clients, just make sure that it is always part of a comprehensive trial process that is utilizing that feature matching process and comparing features of the different options that are available. And typically the built-in option, if there is one, is just one of the options that is available. The other disclaimer that I want to give is that there can be slight differences between devices, even between iPhones and iPads, and even among iPads of different sizes and generations. And so for some of these features, I will give the instructions for how to enable and use them, but just be aware that that might look slightly different on your device than it does on mine. You can usually Google how to enable these features on your specific device. And so try to focus kind of more on what these features are, what they do, who might benefit, than specifically on how to enable them on a specific device. There are a lot of iOS built-in features, and some of these features we could dedicate a whole webinar to. This is just going to be a brief introduction of just a few of the newer features from the last two iOS software updates. My goal is really just that you'll learn about a few new features and know where you can go to learn more about them or to try them out. Some of these features are intended to help users access the iPad itself, and others are intended to support the user in interacting with their environment or access to communication or other things. Again, we are not covering every iOS built-in. We're just going to cover a few of the newer ones. If you aren't familiar with the features that I mentioned that have been around for a while, like Magnifier and voice control, VoiceOver, assistive touch, there will be some links to resources where you can learn more about those in the end of these slides. And I would definitely encourage you to do that. The features that we'll be talking about today are Assistive Access, Live Captions, Point and Speak, Live Speak, and Personal Voice. Those all came out with iOS 17. So if you have iOS 17 or 18, you should be able to try those on your device. And then from iOS 18, we'll talk about eye tracking, music haptics, vocal shortcuts, virtual trackpad, and some updates to VoiceOver and switch control. iOS 18 just came out about a month and a half ago, so I have not actually had a chance to try most of these features with any of my clients yet, with the exception of Assistive Access. But I would love for anyone to jump in at any time and share any experiences if you all have tried some of these new features with your clients or your students. My vision for this webinar was that I would screen share from my iPad here and show you some of these features. However, what I failed to account for was that most accessibility features won't show up in a screen share or even sometimes in a screenshot or a screen capture, which makes sense, right? If someone is using an accessibility feature, let's say they're using live captions, they need to be able to screen share without viewers on the other end seeing and potentially being distracted by the captions or whatever feature it is that they might be using. But it does make it a little bit difficult to demonstrate some of these features. So I'm going to use kind of a combination of videos and screenshots and YouTube videos to try to help you visualize some of these features. All right, before we dive into them, I would love for everybody to put into the chat which feature you're most excited to talk about today. And I'll go back to this slide. Write in the chat which of these features you are most excited about. Eye tracking, vocal shortcuts, eye tracking. Yeah, I was expecting the eye tracking to be popular. Live speech. Live speech and personal voice. Eye tracking. Great, yay. All right. Well, we're going to start off with one that I don't think anybody mentioned, but I'm excited about this one. Assistive Access. Assistive Access limits access to only certain apps by requiring a passcode to get back to the regular home screen. Very similar to guided access, except that you get multiple apps. With guided access, you just get one app. With Assistive Access, you get multiple apps, and you also get a simplified layout on the device. So the photo on the screen, I've added 4 apps to Assistive Access here. So I've got Mail, Weather, Notes, and the Uber app. So these are the only apps that I can use right now with my device in this mode. And another thing to point out is that it'll display the app icon as well as the text label for the app. So that is the difference between this mode and the regular home screen. And then it also changes the gestures that you use to interact with the device. So for example, if you think about the way that you might typically open your iPad is by swiping up from the bottom of the screen. When it's in Assistive Access, it'll actually tell you tap here to unlock, and then tap here, and then tap here. So theoretically, in Assistive Access mode, the only gesture that you should need is a single tap. And then that's going to be true for this kind of like home screen that you see, as well as apps that are optimized for Assistive Access. But one thing that's really important to consider here is, does the user need the layout within the app simplified as well? So Assistive Access will only simplify or change the layout within an app if it is an iOS app that is optimized for Assistive Access. And they give you a list when you go in and set it up. There's a list of what those apps are. There's not a ton of apps that will do that. But for example, the Uber app is not an iOS app. Obviously, it's made by Uber, not Apple. And so even though you can put this app into Assistive Access, when you actually open the app, it's still going to look the same as it does on any other device. And this was an actual layout that I tried with a client recently. These 4 apps were the apps that he wanted to use. But Uber was really difficult because once you opened it up, the text was very small and there was just so many options within the Uber app. So it was difficult for him to use, even though the concept of assistive access was working really well. That's kind of true of all built-in accessibility features. You always want to test how they will apply to the specific apps that you need to use, because not every app is going to be super compatible with some of these built-in features. So just kind of keep that in mind throughout. Finally, I just want to mention alternate access methods with assistive access. So one of the first things that I thought when I saw this assistive access mode was like how great this would be for someone who is using switch access or eye gaze, right? You have this nice simple grid layout. You've got fewer extraneous choices, which means the user might make fewer mistakes and be much more efficient, especially with like a switch scanning. So I tried both of these access methods in the assistive access environment, and I found, I was a little disappointed. I found eye gaze became pretty glitchy within assistive access, and the switch access, it automatically switched me into the gliding cursor mode rather than the item scanning mode. And it was also kind of glitchy. So at least it seems to me that assistive access is not optimized for alternate access methods other than direct selection.
NYC, oh yes, it's a bustling city.
Sense, right? Like I think technically assistive access is just an overlay. Overlays tend to confuse assistive technologies. I wonder if anyone else has had a similar or a different experience trying to use alternate access methods with assistive access, but I just thought I would share that in case anyone else had the same thought when they first saw this, how great it might be for some of those alternate access methods. And hopefully that is something that will improve in the future. So the first time that you use assistive access, it will step you through some additional setup steps, like it'll have you choose which layout you want to use. You can choose a grid or a list. It'll have you choose which apps you want to include, and you'll set up a passcode. You'll need to use that passcode to put it into assistive access mode, as well as to take it out of assistive access mode. And then after that, you can just turn it on and off. And I'll share a quick video about what that looks like. So I'm going into settings and I'm going to accessibility. And down at the bottom is assistive access. These are the apps I've chosen to put into assistive access mode, and I've chosen a grid layout. And then there are some other settings you could adjust. You select start assistive access, put in your passcode, and it takes a few seconds to load up. And now my iPad is in assistive access mode, so I only have access to these 6 apps. I've got this nice grid layout. And then here I'll show you an app that is optimized for assistive access. So the camera app is one that's optimized for assistive access, meaning when I'm inside of the app itself, it will have that simplified layout where everything has an icon and a text label. And I'm typically going to get fewer options that I might get in the regular app environment. So that's what that looks like. Every app also gets this nice big back button. And then when I want to leave assistive access, I triple click the lock button and I have to enter my password again. And I'm back out. Okay. Live Captions provides on-screen captions for in-person conversations, phone calls, and FaceTime, as well as videos or other audio that you might want to listen to on your device. So this might be really useful to someone who's deaf or hard of hearing, or potentially someone with a central auditory processing disorder who might benefit from captioning. It can also be really useful if you're ever in a busy environment and you don't want to have to turn the volume up on your device, or maybe you're FaceTiming in a public place and you don't want everyone to hear your conversation. You can turn on captions. Per Apple Accuracy may vary and should not be relied upon in emergency or high-risk situations. And I found it is definitely not perfect. It is not 100% accurate. But if another caveat is that if you are still on iOS 17, it's going to be called iOS Live Captions Beta. So you're just looking for something slightly different, supposedly more of a beta version, although I haven't noticed a huge difference in accuracy between the two versions. It also works in airplane mode. And then I'll show you, these are the instructions for how you can go enable live captions. You can adjust the appearance of your captions. So if you want bigger text or bolder text, you can do that in your settings menu. And then I'll show you a video of what that will look like when you do enable. Then going into settings and accessibility again to turn on live captions. And under hearing, I'm selecting live captions and I toggle it on. And now there's this gray icon in the corner of my screen, and that can be used to expand my caption window. I can decide which microphone I want to use. So the microphone I've selected is the device's microphone, so that'll pick up in audio in the environment, like if I'm having a one-on-one or an in-person conversation with someone. Otherwise, the other option would pick up audio coming from the device. So if I'm watching a video on the device, or if I'm FaceTiming, or if I'm on the phone, I would have selected the other microphone.
Test. I'm testing out iOS live captions. Everything that my iPad hears will be captioned on the screen.
And so then as I spoke there, the iPad kind of picked up what I was saying and put captions on the screen for what it heard. Now I'll show you how you can make this caption window bigger or smaller. So you can take up more or less of your screen if needed. And you can push it off to the side when you don't need it. Move it around. All right.
Claire,
Yes.
I interrupt you for just a quick moment. We've got a couple questions in the chat.
Yes. Let's see. Do you know if settings can be added as an app to the assistive access screen? That's a great question. I think I was trying to do that the other day and it was not an option. But yeah, I do not see settings as an option of one of the apps that I can add to assistive access. So I think no. Let's see. Would hearing aids be a microphone receiver? Not for live captions. I believe you can set up hearing aids to be a receiver under hearing devices and headphones to be a receiver under headphone accommodations in audio and visual, but hearing aids won't interact with the captions. I don't think. Do you know if live captions could be recorded and sent to someone? They cannot be recorded. At least I don't know of a way. And that is something when I've shown live captions to people, what they're really looking for is transcription and not captioning. Like they want their audio to be captioned in a way that they can save and refer back to it. And this live captions does not do that. It's kind of a one and done. It's there and then it's gone. I don't think there's any way to get back to it later. Okay. Please continue to interrupt me as questions come up. Next feature is detect, which is actually within the Magnifier app. So this is not in your settings menu, but the Magnifier app comes on the devices, so it's still considered a built-in. Detect sort of is similar to the Orcam My Eye or the Seeing AI app, or at least some of the features. And it uses the camera on the device to describe scenes or read printed text aloud. So you could read a sign aloud or a printed document potentially. As I was testing it out, I had better luck asking it to read shorter bits of text, but theoretically it could read a document. It did not read text from my computer screen. That was one thing that I learned. And then so I tested it out, like this is an example, this photo on the screen, and this is an example of me testing it out with a cookbook that I had in my house. The cookbook is called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, and I am holding the device over that cookbook, and then I'm pointing to the title. And there is a yellow box around the title, right above my finger. And there is text at the top of the screen that says salt, fat, acid, heat. And what you don't know, because this is a screenshot, is that as I was doing this, it was speaking that aloud to me, not just kind of captioning at the top. So it's detecting the text by my finger, and then it's speaking that aloud to me. I did discover this looks a little bit different across iPad and iPhone. So again, you may need to Google specific instructions for your device here. But the instructions on the side are how I enabled this feature on my iPad. And then the video that's linked on this slide would tell you how to do it on an iPhone. But again, there might be differences. VoiceOver users can also enable this feature very quickly with a 4-finger triple tap on the screen. And that will open up the Magnifier app and put it into detect mode. The screenshot on the bottom right of this slide, these are the different menu options within detect mode. So point and speak is the feature that I was talking about on the last slide, where it will read text aloud that you point to. So it's looking for your finger and it's finding text. Or you can choose text, which I believe will just read any text aloud that it detects. Or you can choose scenes, which will describe the scene. So for example, when I was testing this out, I first turned it on and I was holding my iPad over my computer, and the scene description that it gave me, it said aloud, was a laptop computer on a wooden table. So it's not 100% accurate. I did quite a bit of testing with it. Not 100% accurate. I'm not sure that there's technology that does this that is, but I was playing around with it and I tried pointing the camera at myself. I thought, like, I wonder how it's going to describe me. And it described me as a child sitting on a couch near a dog. So I was sitting on a couch and I was near a dog, but I'm not sure whether I should be flattered or insulted by it thinking that I'm a child. Okay. Moving on, live speech and personal voice was one that a lot of people in the chat were excited to learn about. This is Apple's built-in AAC option, essentially. So live speech came out with iOS 17, and it enables users to type in a message on the on-screen keyboard, and then that message will get spoken aloud. This can be used for in-person conversations. It can also be used for FaceTime and phone calls on iPhone. I think that the categories feature is new with iOS 18, although I could be wrong about that. But the categories feature is what is in the photo on the bottom of this screen. And I went in and I created some categories and some quick messages within those categories. So my categories, which are represented with a little symbol as well as a text label, are family, greetings, school, and travel. I have greetings selected, and then I have some greetings prepared under this category. So I have good morning, hello, and how are you? And this just enables the communicator to communicate a little bit more quickly with words or phrases that they might use commonly, rather than typing them out fully each time on their keyboard. You can also choose from different voices when you're using live speech, or you can create a personal voice. This is sometimes known as voice banking, and this is where you record your voice onto your device. I think it takes 15 minutes to record yourself, and then I think it has to process overnight. But after that, you'll have a digital voice that is generated when you use live speech that will sound a little bit more like you. So this could be used by anyone who is at risk of losing their verbal speech, such as people with progressive conditions like ALS. And so that's a really nice way to make that AAC communication experience a little bit more personal for those folks. I wanted to create a personal voice to show you all, but unfortunately my iPhone is too old to do that. You not only need iOS 17 or later, but you also need an iPhone 12 or later. And so I wasn't able to do that. But there's some good YouTube videos if you do a Google search for personal iOS personal voice or something like that, you'll find some good examples. And then this slide has some instructions for both enabling live speech as well as creating your personal voice. So if you want to do that. Once you enable live speech, the pop-up that you get on the screen looks really very similar to the one that we looked at with live captions. It's shown in the photo on the bottom of this slide. It says type to speak, and you just type in your message. You can also change microphones so you can, or speakers, sorry, so you can tell it which speaker you want it to come out. Do you want it to come out of the speaker on your device for an in-person conversation, or do you want it to come kind of through the device to someone you're talking to on the phone or on FaceTime? Same as with live captions, that little box that comes up that says type to speak can be moved around the screen. You can make it larger, you can make it smaller, you can adjust text size, all of that. Robin, I don't know if AAC apps are able to access the personal voice once you create it in iOS. Does anybody else know the answer to that? Some can. Speech Assistant AAC can use your personal voice that you've created on your iPad. Is that what you're saying, Megan? Yes. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Okay. Probably the most highly anticipated feature for iOS 18, and a lot of people mentioned this in the chat, is the built-in eye tracking. So this uses the front-facing camera on the iPad, and it also integrates automatically with Assistive Touch. So this allows users full control of their iPad with just eye movement. Again, I have not tried this with a client. I have not even talked with another clinician yet who has. It just came out a little bit over a month ago. So if anyone on here has tried this and wants to share their experience, please jump in. But I have played around with it myself quite a bit. And again, I just find it so exciting that eye gaze users now have at least an option for eye gaze access to iPad without needing an additional camera. So it's exciting stuff. If you are going to try this out, a couple things to keep in mind. Like any eye tracker, positioning is going to be very important, and it'll give you a little bit of guidance. Like it'll tell you, make sure it's on a stable surface and make sure it's like about 1.5 feet away from the user's eyes. But just know that you might have to play around with the positioning to get the eye tracker to work really well, like you do with any eye tracking system, right? Every single time you enable eye tracking, it will take you through about a 15 to 20 second calibration where you will follow a dot around the screen with your eyes. But it's very easy to enable. And then once you enable it, there are lots of features you can decide whether or not you want to use. Let's see. So those different features, I think by default, it will use a dwell click, meaning that when you hold your gaze over an item, it will perform the click, and you can adjust the amount of dwell time required to perform the click. You can turn snap to item on or off, and this will automatically move the cursor to the nearest clickable item. Zoom on keyboard keys can be really nice for typing on the on-screen keyboard. Basically what this does is it will zoom in on a group of keyboard keys while you're typing with the eye tracker so that you can more easily select the correct key. And the video that I'll show to demonstrate this will show you that zoom on keyboard keys feature. Hot corners can be set up so that when you dwell your gaze in one of the corners of the screen, you can perform certain actions, and you can set up what those actions are. So you might set it so that dwelling in the top left corner will open your recalibration menu. Dwelling in the top right corner might be lock screen. The bottom right corner might be go to home screen or notification center or any number of different actions that typically use multiple steps can be done with that one step of dwelling in one of the corners of the screen. Sound actions is kind of similar, except it is training the device to perform those complex multi-step actions in response to a sound that it hears. So it could be when I make the sound, my device goes back to its home screen or its lock screen or performs a certain gesture like a long press or whatever I set that action to be for that sound. And so I just thought that that was very cool and potentially very useful for an eye gaze user who does have good control over certain sounds or words or utterances. They can have more efficient access to some of those complex multi-step gestures with fewer steps. I'm just going to check the chat. Sounds can act as switches, either using the sound actions is sort of similar to using the sound as a switch in that a sound performs an action. You can also set up sounds as a switch within the switch control menu. Hopefully that answers that question. And Brittany shared a link to a blog that talks about apps that Personal Voice works with. Thank you so much, Brittany. Okay, so this is how you can go into your device to set up eye tracking. One thing to note is that some of the settings that I talked about on the last slide are going to be found under the eye tracking menu. And for some of them, they're under the assistive touch menu. So just make sure to go into both of those menus and figure out which settings you want to use as you're setting this up. And here's a video. This is a screen capture, so you can't actually, unfortunately, see me, but this is me using eye tracking. I did have snap to item on, so as my eyes get close to different clickable items, it will bring the cursor to that. And I'm just going into the notes menu and I'm trying out just typing with the eye tracker. So this is that zoom to keys feature where when it thinks it knows what key I want to select, it will zoom in to the keys around it. And then I have bigger targets to select from. And just typing hi. And now I'm using the predictive text to go a little faster. I think my dwell time was set to 1 second here. That red circle is my cursor, and then with snap to item on, as my cursor gets close to something, it turns into a box around the item that it thinks I'm looking to select. All right, I just wanted to pause here for a minute. Are there other questions? Does anybody have experiences they want to share? I'm just checking the chat again. Yeah, so to clarify with the question about eye tracking versus head tracking is more commonly becoming a built-in. And I think you're right, Carrie, not always requiring an actual sensor that's worn, but the difference still being tracking head movement versus eye movement. Okay. Well, feel free to continue putting questions, comments, ideas, experiences in the chat at any time. Okay. So vocal shortcuts uses words, phrases, or utterances to perform gestures or complex multi-step sequences on the device. So this is very similar to the sound actions concept in eye tracking. You can record any word, phrase, or utterance, and then choose what action you want it to perform. Someone with non-standard speech could either choose an utterance that they can really consistently repeat, or they might choose a word or phrase. And even if they say it differently, they can kind of train the device to how they say that word. So for example, I set up a vocal shortcut so that when I say, ah, my device locks. And so the way that you do that is you type in what you want your verbal command to be. And again, it can be a word, a phrase, or an utterance. And then you select what you want the action to be. And then it will ask you to record yourself saying your verbal command 3 times so that the device can learn what that sounds like for you. Again, this could be really useful in conjunction with a lot of different alternate access methods where complex multi-step sequences and gestures can be replaced with a one-step vocal command. I'll show you quickly. Let me turn my background off so you can see my device here. I set up the vocal command so that when I say that phrase, my device locks. I also set up scroll, I think. So when I say scroll, it will scroll down. Okay.
Claire,
Yes.
does the sound only do one command, or can you have it do close apps, open Safari, or is it just like one sound, one command?
One sound, one command.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Let me double check that, but that is the way that I understood it. Well, you can set up a Siri request. So potentially, that might be worth playing around with a little bit. But most of the actions are kind of like a one action. And Robin said you could potentially use a shortcut. Yes, there's a shortcut option. So those, yeah, so if you're looking to do multiple actions with one command, that might be a way to try that. Okay. The other thing with this is it comes at a time when several companies are releasing speech recognition features for people with non-standard speech. I put a link to the Speech Accessibility Project on here, and Apple is one of the companies, along with like Google and Meta and Amazon, that's funding the Speech Accessibility Project at University of Illinois. Highly encourage you to go read about that work if you work with speech recognition tools or with people with non-standard speech, but they're working on various applications, or mostly AI applications for speech recognition for people with non-standard speech, including full voice control and voice typing and dictation. And so I do hope and think that we'll be seeing really exciting advances with this type of technology in the next few months and years. These vocal shortcuts, I think, are a good place to start, but I really hope that there will be more built-in tools that enable some of these speech recognition features, in particular voice typing for people with non-standard speech. So I think there will be more to come related to this. Here we've got just some different instructions for setting up those vocal shortcuts on iPhone or iPad. All right. The virtual trackpad is an on-screen trackpad mouse, which might be really useful for anyone with limited reach, anyone who isn't able to like reach all areas of the iPad screen, or anyone with difficulty with the gestures, all the different gestures that are needed typically to operate an iPad. But if someone is able to use like a trackpad similar to what's on a laptop. Some people just find the idea of a mouse and a cursor more intuitive than the gestures used with a touchscreen. And this is a way to do that without any additional hardware needed, like a mouse. The photo on this slide shows the virtual trackpad in the bottom right corner of my iPad screen. It is a white trackpad with a red border. And these colors, as well as the size and positioning of the trackpad, are adjustable. This is some instructions for how you can go turn on the virtual trackpad. and adjust some of those preferences. And then I will show you a video of myself using the virtual chat. So there's a kind of a red circle moving around the screen. That's my cursor. What you can't see, because this is a screen capture, is my finger is on the screen moving around that trackpad that's in the bottom right corner with the red border. So I'm moving my finger around there. That's generating directional movement of that cursor on the screen. And I'm just kind of showing how I click on different things, use assistive touch to do different gestures like getting back home. And then I thought, well, this trackpad is kind of taking up a good portion of my screen. Am I still going to be able to get to and click on the things that are behind it? And I discovered that I could. I could get to things that are behind it. Now you can move it around the screen. But if you can't move it around the screen or you don't want to move it around the screen, you would want to reduce the opacity so that you can see what's behind it and still click on things that are behind it. So that was kind of the only takeaway that I had with that. All right. Music haptics. I almost didn't include this because it's only available for iPhones, and we're kind of focusing on the iPad today, but it's a cool feature, so I thought I would include it anyways. Music haptics provides haptic feedback from the device that is synchronized with music. So the target audience is people who are deaf or hard of hearing, but I think that there are a lot of people who might like or really benefit from getting some tactile haptic feedback with the music that they listen to. But you do have to have a newer version of the iPhone. I couldn't even try it out because my iPhone is too old. But the link on this slide has the list of iPhone models that are compatible, that have the haptic engine that can do this. I'm just checking the chat here. Any way to move iPad camera button to the side of the screen? I'm not sure about that. Does anybody know if there's a way to move the iPad camera button to the left side of the screen when in landscape mode? I'm not sure, I'm sorry. And then the other question, how long do you think daily practice would take to be comfortable using these communication techniques? Chris, were you referring to the vocal shortcuts with that question? Oh, eye tracking. So how long would daily practice take to be comfortable using eye tracking or communication with eye tracking? I think it just really depends on the person. I'm not sure I can answer that question definitively. Okay, I'm going to move on. The next feature is vehicle motion cues. And what this does is it's intended to reduce car sickness associated with looking at a device while you're in a moving vehicle. So really important accessibility feature, because a lot of people need to be able to access their vehicle in a car, especially if you think about AAC users, need to have access to their communication while they're in a car. But for a lot of people, looking at a static screen while they're in a moving vehicle can cause motion sickness. So what vehicle motion cues does is it puts these dots around the edges of the screen. I'll show you a video on the next slide, but puts these dots around the edges of the screen, and when the car accelerates or decelerates or turns a corner, those dots move in the same direction as the car, which supposedly helps minimize that disconnect between what the static device that your eyes are looking at and the vestibular system that's telling your brain we're moving, which is kind of the theory behind motion sickness. Again, it's only been out for about a month, but I started looking into some reviews on how well people feel like this works. And I was just looking on Google and Reddit, so you can take that for what it is, but they were pretty mixed. Some people felt like it worked really well for them. Some people did not. Here's a video of that. So you can see these dots around the edge of the iPhone screen. And then when the car turns, the dots kind of move across the screen. And when the car accelerates or brakes, they will move up and down accordingly so that you get some of that same input to your visual system that you're getting from feeling the movement of the car. Okay, couple of final updates. There were lots and lots of updates to existing accessibility features with iOS 18. That's the thing with all of these new accessibility features. The ones that were just released, we can probably expect them to get better with future updates. But here are a couple of the notable updates to the features that we've had around for a while. So VoiceOver added tutorials and practice. I was super excited about this, and I went through some of the tutorials and practice. I found them really helpful. If anybody is like me and maybe works with people who use VoiceOver to access their devices, but you yourself don't feel super confident using it, these are a really, really nice resource just to get a little bit more familiar with the different gestures. They make you practice the gestures until you get them right. So nice tutorials and practice modules on there. VoiceOver also added new voices and I believe new languages. And then the live recognition feature, which is that detect feature that we talked about earlier. I'm not quite sure why they're calling it detect within the Magnifier app, but they're calling it live recognition within VoiceOver. Seems the same to me, but I could be wrong. And then they also added the ability to customize keyboard shortcuts on Mac. Switch Control added a few new switch sources without the need for an actual physical switch. So this means you could use, so with the camera as your switch source, you could use gestures of your hand or your head, depending on whether you're using the front or the rear facing camera. And that could be, those movements could be your switch activation. So if you, for example, if you set up the front camera as your switch source, then moving your head left or right would activate your switch function. And then with the back camera, hand gestures. They also added AirPod gestures. So of course the user would have to have and be wearing AirPods, but then this sort of turns AirPods into, it's really similar to a tilt switch. So when you nod or shake your head, the AirPods sense that movement, communicate it back to the device, and that's your switch activation. All right. I think that's it. I'll check the chat again for any last questions. Kristen says, according to my Google search, it doesn't look like there's a way to move the button. It is fixed to the right. Currently no way to move the iPad camera button, which switches between the front and rear side of the screen. It is fixed to the top right corner of the camera and cannot be customized to appear on the left side. That's too bad. Thanks for looking into that, Kristen. Okay. So after hearing about some of these, I'm curious to know what features everyone is most excited to try out. Live captions, text to voice, live captions, the virtual trackpad, yeah. Eye tracking, assistive access. Yeah, assistive access. We've been hoping something like this would come. I agree. Probably wants to play with the trackpad. All right, awesome. These are the references and resources that I used in developing this presentation, but again, mostly I just went into the accessibility menu on an iPad and played around with the things that were new to me. The menu is pretty it explains things pretty well. Like with each feature, it typically tells you what it is, what it does, and it's pretty intuitive. So I would encourage everyone to just get in there and try these out. And then I also listed some resources if you're looking to learn more about built-in accessibility on other platforms. Google has a really nice YouTube channel that talks about accessibility updates across all Google products. But then each type of device typically has an accessibility web page. So there's the Chromebook accessibility web page, Windows, Mac, and iPad linked on here. And before everybody takes off, please, please, please make sure that you signed in. Maybe we can put that link in the chat one last time, and we can hang around if there are any questions. Great question, Kristen. Do you have to have a certain generation of iPad model in order to get iOS 17 or 18? I don't think so, but you might not have all of the features. Like, for example, my phone is really old. My iPhone is really old. I was able to update it to iOS 18, but I couldn't use like the music haptics. So some features might be specific to newer models, but I think you should be able to update most models. Maybe not really, really old ones, but most models to iOS 17 and 18. Yeah, Trish says not really old models. Okay. Four o'clock, so I think we'll close it down. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Take care.